So now that we know about TypeScript fundamentals and how it differs and also is related to JavaScript, let's dig a bit deeper into the different core types TypeScript knows. The number is the type we see here, and as I explained, there is no difference between integers, like the 5 here, and floats or doubles, as it would be called in other programming languages, like the 2.8 here. Indeed, in JavaScript, and the same is true in TypeScript, all numbers are floats by default. So for JavaScript, and therefore also for TypeScript, there is no difference between 5 like this and 5 like this. It's the same number, essentially. Now, besides numbers, we also have other core types, and that would be strings, so text, and Booleans. So let's also have a look at those. We actually saw all of those in action here in this if statement already, which we learned is a bit redundant. Nonetheless, this here would be a string. Also, of course, 5 with quotes would be a string because it's text. And the result, for example, of this comparison here, that would be a Boolean. This operator, the triple equal sign, or the negated equality operator here, that produces true or false. And of course, we can either produce it dynamically in a if check, which we'll often do, or we initialize a variable with a true or false value. So let's do both here. Here we could add a new constant, print result, and set this to true, for example. And just to make it really clear, this could be a variable as well. It doesn't have to be const, it can be a variable, which you would create with let in JavaScript. But since I don't plan on changing it here, I'll go with a constant. And we could pass this as a third parameter here. Let's say we pass in print result, which holds true here. Now, we immediately get an error, of course, because our add function does not support a third argument. We see expected 2 arguments, but got 3. So therefore, we have to make sure we support a third argument. And there we could add a show result parameter. You could name it print result here as well. I'm going with show result to avoid confusion regarding the naming, but technically these two names would not clash. So here I'll name it show result. And I want to make sure that this is of type Boolean by setting this to Boolean. Again, by adding a colon after the parameter here, and then by adding the name of the type. Now this function accepts this, and now what we can do is we can add a if check here and check if show result. If this is true, we can of course compare it to true, but as you know in JavaScript, you can also just pass in the truthy or falsy value here, and JavaScript will evaluate it. And if this yields true somehow, or a truthy value in general, then we'll make it into the if block, otherwise we won't. And let's say we do make it in here, and then I want to console log n1 plus n2. Otherwise, in the else case, if we don't make it in there, then I want to return this. So now this is a function which sometimes returns a value and sometimes does not return a value but output it immediately. Now, you could argue if you want to write such a function which is kind of unpredictable or which might behave unexpectedly if you're passing in true here. But here we're doing it. So this function only sometimes returns, sometimes it also does not return, but instead just logs something to the console. Now here we can actually call add just like this and don't need to store it in result and don't need to console log result, because with print result set to true, add itself, so the function itself will print the result. Hence, if we now save that and we recompile our app.ts file here with the tsc command, once this is done, the page will reload, and we still see our output here, but now it's coming from line 6. And if we have a look, line 6 is indeed inside the function. So this is a Boolean. Now let's say we want to customize the output, and therefore we have a result phrase constant here where we say result is colon and then some white space, and we pass that in as well with result phrase here. Well, then we could expect this as an argument here as well. Phrase, which should be of type string, by adding a colon, and then string is the name of the type. And now we could use that phrase to output it as part of our result output if we're printing the result right in the function. So then here we could have phrase plus n1 plus n2. And if we do that and we recompile by repeating that command, we'll see that this phrase is part of the result. But we also now reintroduce the old bug. Because I have a string which I combine with 2 numbers, everything is converted to a string here. And that's not what I want. To avoid this, in this function we could add a result variable here, or a result constant. and store our result here. This will now be treated in a mathematical way because only numbers are involved. And then here we could combine that with phrase or just return it. And now since this is never directly calculated together with a string, this will always be a number. And yes, then here this number combined with a string will be converted to a string. But since the mathematical calculation finished before that, we'll have the right result. So now if we repeat that and I recompile, we get the right output. So now these are the core data types in action. Let's now make sure we fully understand how types are assigned and also why we don't explicitly assign types down there.